Recently, the Rostov region of Russia was subjected to a massive attack by Ukrainian drones. The residents of Bataysk of this region were the most unfortunate, witnessing yet another failure of the Russian armed forces' air defense system. Rostov region governor Yuri Slyusar confirmed an attack by drones on the region. According to him, the Russian air defense system targeted drones over Bataysk, Rostov, the village of Nedvigovka, as well as in the Millerovsky and Tarasovsky districts. Slyusar claimed that all drones were destroyed by the Russian armed forces. However, footage from Bataysk suggests otherwise. Putin's army hunting drones carried out a targeted strike on a multi-story building, destroying a dozen cars and damaging stores and other civilian facilities in the city. One local resident not only posted the footage online, but also called for an attack on the Kremlin, where, according to him, all the troubles originated. Information also appeared online that one of the substations in the Rostov region was hit. Residents were evacuated from a residential building in Rostov Oblast's Bataysk as authorities worked to determine if the structural integrity of the property was intact following damage, Slyusar said, later adding that residents were allowed to return to their homes afterwards. The Rostov region is an important military and logistics hub for the Russian armed forces. It is home to a railway junction, military airfields, and oil refineries. Ukrainian drones often visit the Rostov region. Recently, Ukrainian drones struck the Novoshakhtinsky petroleum plant in the Rostov region of Russia, causing a fire. This Russian facility is located less than 200 kilometers from the front line in Donbass. The proximity of the refinery to the Ukrainian border makes it important for supplying fuel to the Russian invasion forces. This facility has already been struck by Ukrainian drones more than once. Some days ago, Atesh partisan group sabotaged railway infrastructure in Russia's Rostov Oblast, disrupting Russian logistics. Operatives with the group destroyed a traffic control cabinet on a railway near the town of Novocherkassk, Atesh said. Russian troops reportedly used the railroad to transport military personnel and supplies. The sabotage operation disrupted Russian supply lines, creating a chain reaction of delays in transport toward the southern front line, the group said. The Atesh movement regularly commits sabotage attacks on Russian territory and in Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. Russia's Rostov Oblast is situated alongside the Ukraine-Russia border and borders Russian-occupied Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. Given its proximity to the front line, the region serves as a regular target of Ukrainian attacks. Over almost of time as the Great Patriotic War, Russian occupiers in Ukraine have suffered many times greater losses and been tens of times less effective. This was reported by Alexander Kovalenko, a military and political observer for the Information Resistance Group, in a report on Obozrevetel media outlet. He noted that comparisons between World War II and the war in Ukraine are often made primarily in terms of duration. Specifically, the full-scale Russian-Ukrainian war has now lasted over 1,330 days, while the phase of World War II, also known as the Great Patriotic War, lasted 1,418 days. Kovalenko compared the losses of the Russian occupation forces in Ukraine and the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army (RKKA) during the Great Patriotic War. Thus, the occupiers' losses in Ukraine currently amount to over 1,127,000 killed and wounded, or an average of 850 people per day. The Red Army's losses during the Great Patriotic War amounted to 27 million people, or an average of 19,000 per day. We'll use the same principle to calculate tank losses. The occupiers currently lose 11,259 tanks, or an average of 8 to 9 tanks per day, while the Red Army loses 83,500, or 58 to 60 tanks per day, the Observer calculated. At the same time, the number of main battle tank losses by the Red Army also included self-propelled artillery units such as the Su-76, Su-85, ISU-152 and others, which makes a detailed comparison somewhat difficult. Furthermore, Russian troops have lost over 23,350 armoured combat vehicles to date, or an average of 17 to 20 per day. During the Great Patriotic War, this type of vehicle was not so common, and therefore the Red Army's losses amounted to over 13,000 armoured combat vehicles, or 9 per day. The Russians have also lost over 33,680 barrel-type artillery systems to date, or an average of 25 per day. Meanwhile, during the Great Patriotic War, the Red Army lost approximately 90,000 barrel-type artillery systems and over 30,000 mortars, or an average of 90 per day. Regarding multiple launch rocket systems, the Russian invaders lost 1,520 units in this category, or an average of 1 per day. During the Great Patriotic War, the Red Army lost over 1,800, or an average of 1 per day. The aggressor country's army has also lost over 64,350 vehicles to date, or an average of 48 to 50 per day. During the Great Patriotic War, the Red Army lost approximately 410,000 vehicles, or an average of 290 per day. As we can see, the losses in many categories are simply incomparable, which raises questions about how comparable these wars can be given the disparity in scale. Or is it not so clear-cut? Kovalenko notes. He noted that the average frontline length during the Great Patriotic War was 3,000 to 3,500 kilometers. Meanwhile, the front line in Ukraine is 1,200 kilometers, which is 3 times shorter on average. The USSR's territorial losses and gains during the Great Patriotic War amounted to more than 5,400,000 square kilometers. In fact, the Red Army lost 5 soldiers killed and wounded for defending, liberating, and capturing 1 square kilometer. And in terms of time, the loss, liberation and capture of territory exceeded 3,800 square kilometers per day. The analyst noted Russian occupation forces lost more than 1,127,000 killed and wounded, capturing 71,108 square kilometers, or 16 bodies per square kilometer, and the rate of territorial capture is 53 square kilometers per day. Thus, Kovalenko emphasizes, comparing the war in Ukraine with the Great Patriotic War is correct not only in the context of the time period, but also in the issue of interpolation of losses, the effectiveness of military operations, and their impact. Thanks to this comparison, we can see in figures that Russian occupation forces in Ukraine over almost the same period as the Great Patriotic War have suffered many times greater losses and been tens of times less effective, the Observer noted. He noted that the scale of the conflict is entirely different, but by reducing everything to a 1,200-kilometer front line where only certain sections are active, and interpolating all known casualty data, we arrive at a figure that would make Zhukov nervously smoke. Even the Red Army didn't fight with meat the way the Russian army does now, Kovalenko added. In these circumstances, the number of desertions in the Russian army is increasing,